Good evening, sir.
Well, hello. How are you?
I'm doing well on this chilly but still pleasant Saturday here in February. I understand that you've got some chilly weather as well.
I've never seen, we're obviously in Southern California or in California, you can go skiing in the mountains.
Mhm.
I have never in my life, in the 34 years I've lived in California, seen snow at this elevation landing on the ground and sticking. It's never snowed. And today I watched it snow for 3 hours. It was so my dogs are freaking out. They'd never seen snow. They didn't know what was going on, and it was actually quite delightful. But strange because I kept taking pictures of the snow falling past the palm trees just because the dichotomy of that imagery is it's so strange. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, we're in the midst of this crazy storm. I mean, obviously we've been in a drought for years, and it's rained quite a bit over the last 2 months, so it's all good for the environment. So that's good.
It is, but it's also maybe like the fates telling us that the times are maybe a changing and possibly a little bit for the better. Since if your aquifers are kind of refilling a little bit,
Yeah,
that's pretty good. That's a good
that's
sign.
that's the best thing. Yeah, in the San Joaquin Valley, where they do a lot of farming, and the lakes are filling back up, the reservoirs are filling back up, so it's good. I guess just in time for nuclear winter when
Just,
the
well,
when the missiles are flying. Hallelujah.
hallelujah, indeed. I mean, it's kind of strange how certain fictions that predict certain cataclysms like this seem to be coming true. It's almost as if did they really predict it, or did they just influence us so much that we decide to follow through with it
Right.
subconsciously?
Right. It's such a shame. I mean, all the why isn't there better things to do?
There's many better things to do, but it actually comes into one of the reasons why I want to do this interview with you, because you brought up on your show Robservations, which one of my favorite shows to watch and listen to is the fraudulent creator. And this is
The
something
fr-
that's been kind of plaguing our industry for a lot longer than we initially suspected. And
yes.
what I wanted to ask you is what do you, because you heard this from another person, who will
Yes.
remain anonymous for the moment or for the duration of this interview. I don't want to
Yes.
reveal their name. And they brought this term up to you, and I was wondering, what did they define as a fraudulent creator and what that really means?
Well, this is a very high-ranking member of the entertainment business who has been in the business for a long time. And they brought this up in relation to one of the banes of their existence was dealing with fraudulent creators, that it happens more often than not. And basically how they defined that was a fraudulent creator was somebody who had achieved some level of success doing something, whether it was writing a screenplay, directing a film, and it was legitimately a successful thing. But then they use that as sort of their calling card to get work that they're not necessarily enthusiastic about, but they know they can get a big payday. They know that they can get a lot more work from it and really cash in on it. But then they don't have to deliver the same quality of work that got them those meetings and jobs in the first place. They don't have to put in the time and effort that got them successful to begin with. And so they take as many jobs as they can. They get as the biggest paydays they can. Their agents, their managers, their team is able to get them through a lot of doors and get them on various projects, whether they're qualified to do those projects or not. And then what ends up happening is the projects themselves suffer. There's only a finite amount of time and a finite amount of money. And whereas other creators might have been better on this particular project, our fraudulent creators have, because the position they now hold, are able to get jobs that they don't necessarily even want. And they end up delivering substandard material, which ultimately makes the final product substandard when it could have been better if other different people were able to get the job. That's sort of basically it.
It sounds very similar to, and you'll probably remember this when you hear about a hot writer or director and they've got lined up almost a half dozen projects that over the next 3 years.
Yeah.
And you're wondering, well, that's a lot of projects. How are they going to have the time for all of that? And given the responsibility of each of those projects, how are they able to deliver the level of quality required when they have such a packed slate? Because that usually always a red flag of someone that is like the it guy or the it girl in the industry, where they just want them to market on their fame, their credibility, their reputation, and get as much product out there as quickly as possible to capitalize on that. But at the same time, it's like, well, you're they're being drawn out in all these directions. They're kind of like burning the candle at both ends, so to speak. Wouldn't that not suffer the quality of their work? And that has been true from time to time. That's why whenever I'm looking at like IMDb is not 100% accurate with a lot of the things on there, but every once in a while you'll see like a writer you maybe not have heard of or a director you not have heard of that has gotten an IP, and then you'll see that they have 5 or 6 upcoming projects, and you're like, that sounds like a very high investment for someone that's still just made a one step closer to notoriety than they had before. So basically what we're seeing is that version, but sought after intentionally, as opposed to just having it occur and then people just coming to them to do work for them, and taking every single job.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest problems too in the industry is, now that these larger, well, the studios and larger entertainment companies are corporately held. Corporations have a way of doing business and hiring people, and they look at their resume, their CV, and what they want is, because they are risk averse, they want to be able to look at a spreadsheet or look down at someone's CV and go, oh, they've worked on this, 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 and this. Now, it doesn't matter whether the project at hand is well suited to this person. If the person has done previous work, that makes them hireable as far as, in the corporate mindset. Mm-hmm. And a good example of this that I always go back to is, for instance, J.J. Abrams, his Bad Robot Company, very successful in television, created shows like Lost. He did direct for Paramount Mission Impossible 3. Well, Bad Robot gets a hold of the Star Trek franchise back in 2007. Now, nobody really asks if Bad Robot or anybody at Bad Robot is a Star Trek franchise fan. Do they have big ideas for the franchise? Do they know how to shepherd that franchise, which has existed since the 60s? How are they going to take it deep into the 21st century? And they make what should be, on paper, by all accounts, a very successful movie. Unfortunately, and J.J. Abrams said this himself in almost any interview he gave when the film was being released, I was never a Star Trek fan. I like Star Wars. So when you look at his film, it really doesn't feel very much like the franchise that it's supposed to be part of. And I think that what you end up getting is J.J. Abrams wants to make his own pastiche of Star Wars and Star Trek and every other action movie. And instead of, for instance, whatever imagery he wants, in Star Trek 09, he made the Starship Enterprise being built on Earth so he could get one shot of the future Captain Kirk rolling up to see the Enterprise being built on Earth on a motorcycle. Well, when I see something like this, that's not what happened in the Star Trek franchise. The idea is that these large capital ships, they might have components assembled on Earth, and then the ships are manufactured, they're put together in space. Now, why is that such a big thing? Why am I harping on that? Well, imagine if you have 50 of these decisions throughout the film, and what it does is it undercuts what made Star Trek Star Trek, and you end up getting a generic space adventure that really satisfies no one. Now, there's a lot of people that might like it, but at the end of the day, the real proof is in the pudding. when a studio spends nowadays 175 million to make a movie and maybe another 50 to 75 million or even 100 million to market that movie, there's an expectation on a $250 million spend, you're going to make between 800 and $1 billion, because the general rule of thumb is that a movie needs to gross 3 or 4 times its budget to break even. And those movies, all 3 of the Star Trek movies under Bad Robot's stewardship, did not, I don't even think Into Darkness broke maybe it just broke 500 million.
Mm-hmm.
But that film, I don't believe Into Darkness even broke even. And so you have creators that are based, well, they were successful in TV and they did all these things. They get hired for these jobs because of their previous successes, whether they really love the material or not. And what ends up happening is they get things that are not satisfying to the studio itself and not satisfying for audiences either. And they underperform. And yet every time somebody gets that job, it's yet another notch on their belt that a corporate company can look at and go, oh, look, they've directed this and this and this and this. Let's hire them. And the problem with that is no one ever takes into consideration whether is it a good fit? Because as you know, there's only a studio has a list of probably only 20 people, if it's even that big, that they want to work with as a director or a writer. Mm-hmm. And all the studios have the same list. They all want the same 20 people, and that's a rotating list. It changes all the time, but it's whoever has had hits over the last, year or two.
Yeah, it's a very narrow window of opportunity for that list to rotate, and that's why Hollywood sometimes, as big as it is, feels very small.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see a lot of people, like, what I find very fascinating now is today, Saturday, when we're recording this, we're on the second weekend of Marvel Studios' Ant-Man. And it's being reported that Ant-Man has had the largest drop in Marvel cinema, the MCU's history, Marvel Cinematic Universe's history, from weekend 1 to weekend 2. And for a movie that grossed over $100 million its first weekend, it had up to a 72% drop in earnings, which is the biggest drop ever.
Massive drop. Almost unheard of for a studio film of that type.
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting is I bear Jeff Loveness, the writer of that film, no ill will, but he'd never written a feature before. He'd written television, he'd written a lot of animation like Rick and Morty, mm-hmm. but this is his first feature. Now, I understand how he could get the job, or maybe they thought that the science fiction on Rick and Morty, some of which is quite good, made him an ideal candidate to write this film. But I would postulate that he wasn't the right candidate to write this movie. And the proof is in the pudding. And of course, he's slated to write one of the next Avengers movies. So I would ask a real question here, that it ain't show friends, it's show business. And here's a movie that he wrote that had this precipitous drop in the second weekend. And I think that for whatever reason, that movie, Quantum Mania, is ill-conceived on a number of different levels, but I won't get into why. But it's just, now that he's written this movie, is he going to still get to write the next Avengers film? Did he already have that locked in? And I bear him no ill will. I don't know him, and mm-hmm. I've seen him speak, and he seems to be a very nice guy. But the fact of the matter is he the best person to steward one of the most successful, the Avengers within the MCU? The Avengers movies are incredibly successful. Endgame being, it was at one point the biggest grossing movie ever until mm-hmm. Avatar took its title back. So the question is, what do you do now? I mean, what does Jeff Loveness do? His first movie that he wrote was almost a $200 million movie, and it didn't perform. So where is he at? And does Marvel continue to retain him to write their Avengers movie? And if so, why?
That's a very good question, because it all goes back into, like, when I was starting out, if you had a flop of that magnitude, everyone would be very apprehensive to work with you ever again.
Yeah.
And that was fair, and it was justified. And if you had the cojones to admit that and be like, yeah, I screwed up, but I've learned from that, and work your way back up doing smaller projects and whatnot, you would gain a great deal of respect within the industry for that, because you have the one, the never give up mentality, which is really well regarded. And then
Yep.
the other one too is proving your value by committing to the work and not repeating the same mistakes. And um, not only that, but there's another writer who's in the same type of realm, which is Dave Callahan. And in a very short time, he did the sequel to Zombieland. He did Mortal Kombat 2020, the 2021 one. He did Wonder Woman 84, and he did Shang-Chi. And all of those movies were quite poorly received, not as well as they could have been. Even though I saw a great deal of potential in Shang-Chi, I felt that it was kind of, it needed maybe two or three more rewrites to
Right.
really
Yep.
get it in its best part, because I thought the subplot of the father wanting to reconnect with his wife who he had lost, I thought that was very compelling and good for good story too. But I don't want to stay too much on that, because what I want to sort of dovetail a bit into is that we do the actions that create a fraudulent creator, are they really coming from the talent, or is it being kind of enabled by the corporatization of the studio system?
I think it's both, because look, when you're working in Hollywood, you want to get as much as you can while you can for as long as you can.
Mm-hmm.
That old line from Almost Famous. I mean, you, and I understand that. But the thing is the studio, is the corporation that's hiring you getting the most bang for their buck? Are you, as a creator, delivering on what what your employer is expecting you to deliver on? And I think there's a lot of times when people know for a fact they're not going to deliver what they're supposed to deliver, but they take the job anyway because they're getting paid. And there's who quantifies whether it's good or not. I mean, and if somebody gets paid and you've got an ironclad agreement, let's say you get paid, I don't know, $1 million. You're going to get paid $1 million whether the script is good or not. You might toss one off in a weekend, but it doesn't matter, because how do you quantify that? You can't put in a contract, well, this better be good, because how do you define good?
Yeah.
And yet, are you getting a creator's best work? And I think a lot of the time you're not. And, you see it, or a creator is out of their depth, and yet they're taking jobs anyway. And why wouldn't you? I mean, if you're getting paid, and I've seen in my own life, people, you get a lot of money if you work in various areas, and if you get great success, you get a lot of money, but there's also a lot of slacking off, and there's a lot of people who phone it in, and there's a lot of phoning in that is put up with, because how can you go after somebody that you think is phoning it in? But especially when somebody already has the credibility and they deliver something, if you feel that it's, I don't know, it's lackadaisical, how do you call somebody out and say, hey, I don't feel we're getting our money's worth here? And people don't do that. They'll just go hire another writer. Yeah. And that is absurd to me. And there's a lot of that goes on in the business, because once you have nowadays one success, you make a movie like Safety Not Guaranteed, like Colin Trevorrow did.
Yeah.
His next movie is Jurassic World. Now, I'm not slamming Colin Trevorrow, but he got a Star Wars movie that didn't get made. He then made another feature film that wasn't that well received. And yet he goes from Safety Not Guaranteed, because Spielberg liked him, to directing Jurassic World. And now, because he directed Jurassic World, he has the credibility to meet with studios and get another $200 million movie to direct, whether he's ready to do that or not. And I think a lot of times when people get these franchise properties, there's a lot of safety net below you, because all the other departments carry you, and it's okay. No one's expecting Colin Trevorrow to go from $1 million movie to a $200 million movie. So what you do is you surround him with all the people that do know how to make a $200 million movie. But on the other hand, how is that helping Colin Trevorrow?
It's not. Yeah, because you pinpointed something that I brought up many times, and I've seen this with people that are entering the industry more recently, as I've been involved in it for a little over 16 years now, where they get this great opportunity, an opportunity that they would be foolish to resist or reject.
Sure.
But what you end up seeing is that they're brought in either as a director or a showrunner or a writer, screenwriter on a bigger project. But because they're a little green, they're a little desperate to please, they acquiesce to any creative decision that comes from above.
Yep.
And and I think studios and certain producers like that, because if they were to get someone that earned their accolades, earned their reputation, earned their experience, they would end up pushing back on some of those ideas because they might be able to be the few ones in the room that see the forest for the trees and be like, I don't think an audience is going to register with that. I don't think it's going to hit the way you want it to hit. And they don't, and I think certain studios and certain people within those systems don't want to get that criticism because it always frustrates them. And then on the other part, they end up losing in the past that you would lose frequently and the film would be a hit, but then they always have lingering in the back of their mind, well, if I did it, if I got it my way, it'd probably be a bigger hit. And now
Yeah.
they found a way to do it by grabbing young, hungry, desperate filmmakers and basically saying, just do what I tell you. You'll get your safety net. You'll get a credit. You'll be able to use that as reputation to go off to the next big thing. Just do what I tell you, and you're free to go after this. And that's why we're seeing such turnover. That's why I think we're seeing a lot of these very talented and potentially would be fantastic writers in the future get these opportunities on MCU films, on other Disney properties, a couple of Paramount features, and they're just not delivering the hits that is being intended by the studio because they're not really being creative. They're just being essentially a more coherent monkey on a typewriter for these
No,
entities.
no, you're right. And then the question is, how does anyone, like all the people that I admired when I was a kid wanting to make movies, reading Starlog or Fangoria or Cinefantastic magazine, you'd read about whether it was Joe Dante or John Carpenter, David Cronenberg, some of my favorite horror directors, and they all started out the same way. They started out young. Cronenberg was making student films. John Carpenter made his student film of Dark Star that was later picked up and expanded into a feature. They were all cutting their teeth as young film students making features. Same with Joe Dante. And, Cronenberg made things like From the Drain, and then he made Stereo and Crimes of the Future when he was in college. And then he got his first feature, which was They Came From Within, that was made with Canadian tax money. And yet it sold, and then he was off to the races. But these filmmakers all started small, and they learned their craft. Carpenter made Assault on Precinct 13 after he made Dark Star and expanded that. And then after that, he did Halloween, and then he wrote a TV movie, and then directed Elvis for TV with Kurt Russell. And these people, they made mistakes. I mean, the first time Carpenter showed Halloween, it wasn't scary, and it wasn't until he scored the film himself that it became scarier and audiences liked it. And it was through trial and error. And the thing was, Halloween was a movie that was made for $300,000, so you could do that. But now the business has changed so much that suddenly a guy who's made $1 million movie is directing a $200 million film as his second movie.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have the knowledge they need to continue on. I mean, it used to be that we had a lot of great directors, even like Michael Bay and David Fincher and Dominic Sena, and a lot of these guys came out of music videos. And not a lot of them became great directors. A lot of them worked, but David Fincher was actually a great director. He was a real student of cinema, and he cut his teeth making some of the best music videos of the 80s and 90s. But all these guys they all learned on the job, and they learned honing their craft. And there's no time to do that anymore. So like you said, there's so much turnover in the industry because when you have a team of people, they're just looking to find what's the best payday we can get you. And hopefully you don't F it up and you'll get to another payday. But that kind of thinking does not build a career. What you want to do is, I would think that people want to have their careers nurtured, that we need more than ever, we need brand new, young, upcoming talent that is going to be the next wave of filmmakers that are going to make movies for the next 50 years. Or maybe, maybe cinema is dead, but there's always going to be, whether it's streaming. I mean, I think a lot of movies that we would want to see have not been made and instead been turned into 10-part streaming shows. And that's fine too, because they still need writer directors. But in the sense that we need people that are talented, that know their craft and have time to hone their craft as they continue to move up the ranks through the industry.
It sounds to me like you want to return to, and just to bring in a Star Trek reference, a prime directive for creatives, where you don't influence or give them advanced technology beyond their means that they're ready for, which is what essentially has been happening with some of these young filmmakers. They're on their own rate of progression to hit that $200 million threshold. But when you pluck them out of that $1 million independent sphere and throw them in there, it's overwhelming. And what we end up seeing more often than not is self-destruction as opposed to prosperous, change of talent and content.
Yeah, I mean, I think of like Josh Trank. I don't know Josh, but I really liked his film Chronicle. I thought Chronicle was a really solid piece of work, low budget superhero, alien powers. I really enjoyed it. And then, of course, suddenly his next movie is doing Fantastic Four for Fox. And it turned into a bit of a debacle, a lot of a debacle. And he was also slated to direct a Boba Fett movie for Disney. I mean, he's made one film. Now, admittedly, I thought it was a good film.
Agreed. Yeah, me too.
But then all of a sudden, the franchises come for him, and Fantastic Four turned into a bit of a mess, and he sort of lost control of it. Then the studio usurped control back for them, and Josh Trank has not made another movie. I don't think. I think
he did the Al Capone film.
Oh, that's right. So he did Defund.
Yeah, he did that. But it was a smaller movie, but it was definitely something. I think that would have been a better movie for him to do after Chronicle, as opposed to these tentpole films, these IPs that are a much greater responsibility. Because, I mean, you brought up Bad Robot getting Star Trek, and one of the things that I asked back when I heard that announcement, and I heard that rumor in 2006 that that he was getting Star Trek, and I was like, well, Bad Robot is known for television franchises, and they're fairly successful with them, but that's not the same as a feature film franchise. Where have they proven that they could do that on their own? Because I think the only thing he had was Cloverfield, and that was one film, and it's like,
and he just produced it.
And yeah, he produced it because it was just a cheap production. It was a Godzilla type thing.
Yep.
And it just kind of baffled me because, like where do they make a jump on this? Like, he did Mission Impossible 3, which kind of revived that franchise, because unfortunately number 2 did not do what Paramount needed to.
Right.
But the other part that was also red flag, and this is what I learned almost immediately after Mission Impossible 3, is that how much Tom Cruise enjoyed doing the movie and how he respected and admired JJ for doing the job they did, he wasn't really interested in working with him again.
Right.
And that tells me something, because it's like, you've got, one of the biggest stars of the 80s that is still a movie star 40 years later. And he says, never say a bad thing about JJ or even the other directors he's worked with, except for maybe, I think, one, but I can't remember the name of that. But it's telling when he doesn't work with them again. And that's a data point that someone with a spreadsheet should be paying attention to, because it's like, you have one of your biggest stars, and we have a director over here that's on the rise and very popular. He knows how to sell stuff, because J.J. Abrams is one heck of a salesman.
Yeah, he is.
That. But for some reason, we can't get these two back together after that one movie. Like that, why is that? What's going on there? And why is Tom Cruise never failing to deliver on the movies he makes? Because even though they may not always reach $1 billion or what have you, even some of the science fiction films he's done, they may not have been as great as the Mission Impossible franchise, but they're never horribly panned or upset fans.
No, and if
it's just he doesn't divide the audience the way that some of these other directors and actors have.
I mean, he hasn't, like, I look at Tom Cruise has a subset of science fiction movies. I think the best of those are the best is Edge of Tomorrow.
Mhm.
But he made Oblivion with Joe Kosinski, who later went on to work with him on Top Gun Maverick.
Yep.
And then of course, he made Minority Report and War of the Worlds with Spielberg, and he made these films, and maybe Oblivion didn't do as well as it should have, but it's a very respectable movie. And you watch it, and even now there's a lot of rewatchability there. It's handsomely produced, it's very well made. And yet Tom Cruise did go on to work with Kosinski a decade later, and they make they make Top Gun Maverick together. And what's interesting is I kind of watched this happen when Bryan Singer, because I'd been working for him making documentaries, made Valkyrie back in I think it was 2009 or something. And Chris McQuarrie came back to work with Bryan. They previously worked on the first X-Men, but they worked together. They grew up together, and they worked on Usual Suspects, and McQuarrie won an Oscar. And he kind of floated around, but McQuarrie again stuck it out. He nose to the grindstone, and he wrote Valkyrie and developed a relationship with Tom Cruise, and they've been really working together ever since. McQuarrie was a producer and rewrote Top Gun. He's now directed. They're working on their fourth Mission Impossible movie together. They did Rogue Nation. They did Fallout. They did Dead Reckoning Part 1, and now they're doing Dead Reckoning Part 2. And I mean, that's the kind of relationship that you want to have. And McQuarrie was a guy, he wrote Bryan's first movie, Public Access, and they did Usual Suspects as their second film. But even Usual Suspects was an indie movie.
Yep.
It was made for $5 million. And they cut their own teeth. And then he directed Way of the Gun, and then did some writing, kind of fell out of Hollywood and came back. But, these are people that are lifers in the business. And when McQuarrie was finally given his due after having some success and then not working for a while and then doing script rewrites, he comes back guns blazing and hasn't missed yet with those Mission Impossible films, and then writing and producing Top Gun. And those are the kind of people that you want in the industry. And I see a lot of when you see these large profile movies. I mean, I remember reading about, I forget who directed it, but the director of Robert Downey Jr.'s Dr. Dolittle film. The director had no experience with effects. So you're making an effects heavy movie. You have to have an understanding of how effects plates work and all of that. He had no understanding of that, and the movie turned into a real problem. And it went over budget, and they had to do all this reshooting, and nobody wants that. And at the end of the day, the film turned out to be, the studio took a bath. The movie didn't make any money. And you ask yourself at the end of the day, well, how did this happen? How do people get these jobs? You'd think at the corporate level that there would be more oversight in terms of not just, well, so what can you show us? And what I find so interesting is, on the other hand, you have someone like a Kevin Feige, who does have a talent for, nobody else would have given James Gunn $175 million to make Guardians of the Galaxy, except Kevin Feige, because Kevin Feige could look at James Gunn's two movies of Slither and Super. Those are two films he made. They're both around $3 million level box. Their budgets were 300. Their budgets were $3 million. And then Kevin Feige can look and go, it doesn't matter how much a movie costs. This person has the chops to tell a story. And then also James Gunn had worked with the studios, writing movies like Dawn of the Dead and Scooby-Doo, and worked at Troma. So he'd been in the business for a long time, working his way up. And so that's, if a guy like Kevin Feige can, and it worked out. Guardians of the Galaxy made $750 million. And the second one made a little more. And that's a great track record, because, and I think Marvel, when Marvel works best, they work synergistically. I mean, it's more like a TV show, and that the executive producer, Kevin Feige, has the final say, but they have but then again, they've worked with a lot of directors. You don't hear who directed Captain Marvel.
Two people, and I can't remember their names.
Precisely. And have they worked with Marvel again?
No. And so here's the other thing that because you bring up that Kevin Feige's kind of doing it like a TV series. And one of the things that I remember in my intern days and my earlier types of writing is that you would listen to showrunners and they would say, because we're doing 22 to 25 episodes a season, not all of them are going to be great episodes. It just happens. And now we see that model being used on the film side of things. And lo and behold, we're 31, 32 films into a series and we're getting some duds. It's almost like a burnout, but that also has to do with the fact that they're the showrunner right now, I think, is spreading themselves too thin.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's also the risk of oversaturation because I think fans would have been very satisfied with 2 Marvel movies a year.
Oh yeah.
You one for the summer, one for the winter, you're good to go. But before the pandemic hit, they were pushing 4 movies a year. And that's a lot to do. And it's not so much a fatigue on the audience side of things as it is kind of a fatigue on the creative side, because how are you able to churn out this much and maintain a quality? And it begs the question of, well, is this desire a factor that could allow someone who has the discipline to avoid being a fraudulent creator compelled to actually have to phone it in or work so fast that they actually can't deliver the quality and then fall into that pit, realizing that, oh, I'm still getting paid the same. I'm still getting whatever points I negotiated off the profit of the film. Why do I have to put in all this work, especially considering the fact that we've seen a pattern where it doesn't matter how successful it is, the credit itself is now a form of currency that will get me another job.
That's exactly, I think, part of the problem with the industry in general. And the thing is, it's funny because I see a lot of the creators that I've liked that have staying power that have been around for a long time. They're older. I don't see a lot of young filmmakers. I mean, somebody like maybe a Robert Eggers, for instance, who made The Witch and who made The Northman and who made The Lighthouse. I think Robert Eggers is a talent. Why would you give somebody $90 million to make The Northman? I don't know. But The Northman didn't make its money back. I thought it was a really well-made movie. But what did Robert Eggers do to his career? I mean, The Witch, great example of creating atmosphere and fear. Really, 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 I thought a terrific piece of work. And I really liked The Lighthouse. It wasn't as fun and it was a little bit more challenging to watch than, say, The Witch was, but still respectable and interesting and created something that, and I know that Robert Eggers wanted to make The Northman, but by taking a big budget, $90 million is not cheap. And his previous 2 movies weren't anywhere near that. Mm-hmm. There was nothing that could indicate that Robert Eggers should be given $90 million, maybe $30 million. Could he have made, and it might have been much more helpful for his career. But now that 90 million albatross around his neck that didn't make its money back, he might not work. Or I mean, maybe he'll work. I don't know. But is he going to be hireable after that? I mean, I would posit that he deserves to be hired, and that the failure of The Northman, especially in this day and age where we've got Game of Thrones and Vikings and so many people are interested in that kind of stuff. How can you, I would say part of the reason The Northman didn't do as well as hoped is a failure of marketing. But
which has been a problem in Hollywood for 20 years, I would say.
Yeah. And that's another thing. The marketing people, they don't know what they're doing.
They don't know how to sell stuff. So there's another thing of a fraudulent creator. You have a marketing department that actually tells you to your face, we don't know how to sell something. And
right.
The reflex response that everyone of, general reasonable intelligence would be, well, then how are you working here?
100%. And it's, it's strange to me that kind of thing goes on when I see marketing for movies where clearly the people that came up with the marketing plan didn't either understand the film, didn't like the film. And I wonder, how is it? And then how did that, whatever they made, how did it get approved? It's strange to me to see the old adage that William Goldman said, nobody knows anything, in his book, Adventures in the Screen Trade. And it's fascinating to me that this kind of thing still goes on. I mean, I think movie marketing is terrible, to be honest. I mean, I miss the days when you'd get a great tagline. I mean, I remember the great taglines of movies 40 years later. In the days of, in space, no one can hear you scream.
Yeah.
Well, those days are long gone. I mean, I remember the poster. I used to have the poster for Nightmare on Elm Street, and the tagline was, "If Nancy doesn't wake up screaming, she won't wake up at all." And I'm like, that's great. I mean, where's that?
Yeah,
And
where's the when hell fills up, the dead walk the earth? I think that's from like
yeah,
Dawn of the Dead, right?
yeah,
Or
there's no more room in hell. The dead will walk the earth. I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, you don't get that. The
or
closest I'd seen recently was remember Contagion? They had a heck of a marketing department where they actually had people in contamination suits and in giant test tubes trying to, marketing the film saying, oh, it's Contagion, it's crazy, it's whatever, be on the streets. And you're like, oh, that's not bad, that's interactive. And then I think around the same time, Warner Brothers with The Dark Knight did the treasure hunt.
oh yeah, the alternate reality game kind of a thing.
Yeah, but they got in trouble with a couple of municipalities because some people thought that the boxes that were changed to certain street fixtures were explosive devices.
Right.
So I understand that how that blows back in your face, but it was one heck of a marketing campaign that did quite well for that film because it broke box office records at the time. And but we don't see anything of that. What I think the old marketing team used to call were spectacles. We don't see those spectacles anymore with with film. We end up getting a template that is kind of used. You have your basic billboards, your bus
Yeah.
ads, your trailer, your teaser for the teaser, your trailer, and unfortunately, like 70% of the time, the trailer spoils the very ending. You're going to go see the film for the film you want to see.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I just think that I think about trailers that I loved in the past. I remember seeing the first Alien trailer, and they kind of copied it for Aliens, James Cameron's Aliens, and it showed you these things, but it didn't tell you anything about the movie. It just showed you these images that made you want to go see it. Like, oh my God, I have to see that. And they these days it's again, they're not doing the job they're paid to do, which is and maybe they are, and then the studio puts the kibosh on it because they're like, no, we want to sell this movie just like this other movie was sold. We want the trailer to be the same, everything should be the same. And it's unfortunate. It's because the marketing people could be innovative and try new things, but the studio doesn't want to do that. But I would maintain that, one of the things, there's barely key art anymore. And key art was the single image that's used to always sell a movie. And the key art was always on a movie poster, and you think about the great movie posters in the 80s, it changed. And it's funny. I interviewed Jerry Bruckheimer the other day, and I was trying to get him to talk about this, but when Simpson Bruckheimer, I maintain they did something that changed movie marketing forever in 1983 when Flashdance came out. The only thing, the poster for Flashdance was just Jennifer Beals, a full frame picture on the poster of Jennifer Beals sitting down in like a recital studio, looking cute with her leg warmers on, her gray sweatshirt. It was torn on the side, which became a fashion icon. She became a fashion icon, and it just was the title of the film.
Yep.
And maybe it was "Take Your Passion and Make It Happen." I don't know, whatever the ad line was. But you looked at that, and then Simpson Bruckheimer kept doing that. They did the same kind of thing with Beverly Hills Cop, where Eddie Murphy was just sitting on the hood of a red Mercedes, and it was a full frame picture of him. And then the Star Cell really changed everything, where then they gave actors approval over the key art for their movies.
Yep.
And of course, when you do that, the actor just wants to look good. He's not thinking, will this image sell our movie the best way it can be sold? And it's a bizarre way to, I don't know, market. And again, I think people, like you said, they've got these plug and play templates. Oh, we just have to make it look like this other thing. And now it's almost like a running joke. Somebody will always say, oh, look at this poster. It was done by this ad agency, and they just did this poster, and they're basically using the same template. And
yeah, which we got, I remember this vividly because in my high school years, right before the turn of the century, we would have a bunch of those National Lampoon films that they would buy. And they would have the same essential poster. It would be like a white backdrop and then either a pair of legs and a bunch of kids looking towards the the audience at the pair of legs or what have you, or something to that effect. And there'd be no real originality to it, nothing clever, nothing that denotes what the movie would be. And you're just completely, you know, wondering, well, why would I buy this or invest in this if it looks like all the others? There, where's the uniqueness to it? Where's the variety that we would get from these movies? It feels like very much a cash grab or an assembly line type of picture, as opposed to something that was supposed to, you know, give you an impact.
Yeah, and it used to. I mean, I growing up being a film fan, I collected movie posters, and they were it was the poster itself. When you looked at the key art image, because that's what the image of the movie is key art, the key piece of art to sell the film. You would look at a movie poster and it would convey what it felt like to watch the entire film.
Mm-hmm.
I used to say it would mythologize the movie, and then it would give you an ad line, for instance, and the ad lines had to be good. Craig Mazin, I worked briefly at an ad agency where he worked, and he wrote the tagline for Crimson Tide, and the tagline for that was "Danger runs deep," and I was like, 3 letters or 3 words, but that's you know, that was a submarine movie. That was a really clever ad line. And he went to Princeton. You know, he's a very highly educated guy. And I don't think until Chernobyl and now The Last of Us has he been given an opportunity to show just how much he could do. He was working on the Hangover movies and certainly he's had a good career. But you know, coming up with an ad line like that really encapsulates the whole movie is a hard thing to do. And it used to be that was something that was in itself an art form, and ad agencies would come up with these great bangers of taglines. I mean, I remember Star Trek 4. The tagline for Star Trek 4 was, "How on earth can they save the future?" And it was, you know, that play that, but I'm saying it the way I would say it in a sentence, but using that on the poster was because if you know what the movie's about, they have to go back in time to the Earth of the 20th century. So what a great ad line.
Yep.
And it worked multiple ways. And I thought that was really clever. And now we don't have that anymore, because I don't even think there's people at ad agencies that know how to write taglines, nor do studios feel they need them.
That brings me to my final question with regards to fraudulent creators and the dichotomy of how that plays with marketing, film development, and release, which is, can one really escape being a fraudulent creator if they started out that way, given the way that the industry functions now?
That's a very good question. I mean, look, I think it's, you know, if I look at my own career, I have never had great success financially. But I would say that every movie that I've worked on as an editor or a producer, because I've worked on a lot of low budget properties, I never looked down on any of the projects that I've worked on. And as a matter of fact, I've always said, okay, the last film that I produced and edited, Tango Shalom, was a bit of a mess, and I sort of inherited it. And I looked at it, and as a creative challenge, I said, this movie does not work right now. I knew that it was not, there wasn't the material wasn't all there. It wouldn't work in any shape that it was currently in when I got it. However, I thought to myself, okay, well, how can we make it work? What does it need? We used judicious reshoots, but small reshoots. We used stock footage. We used all kinds of things, and we were able to pull it together and turn it into something that I was proud of the work we did on that movie. And I think that the movie is the best version of itself it could possibly be based on how it was shot and the budget level. And it's funny because people, you know, it doesn't blow anybody away. There's some people that really like it. It's won festivals. It's played all over the world.
I really enjoyed it because I thought it was a very beautifully told story.
Oh, well, thank you. And I worked with the director for years. and under difficult conditions, like no money, but we kept going. And what was really interesting about that was we just didn't stop until we thought we cut out everything that we didn't like. And it was a process, but the point is that we put all of our creative energies into it to make it was a very small budget film. I'll say that it was around $1 million and less. But if we'd billed them for all the time you put in, it would have been more. But here was the thing. We knew that we could make this movie as good as it could be because we weren't going to give up. So we put the time in. And I think now, because of the way the business works, people don't have the kind of time we had. So they have to deliver quicker. But in doing so, you end up getting a half-assed, you're doing things half-assed. And if you have always been doing things half-assed, like if you're working at companies that they themselves it doesn't matter, just get something, just turn something in. I think there's always a way you can turn it around. And it's really up to you. It's up to the creator that's being paid to put their best foot forward. And I've always tried to do that. And I think that nowadays the business doesn't necessarily reward that kind of behavior. And yet Hollywood is more risk averse than it's ever been, because movies at the studio level are more expensive than they've ever been. I mean, I remember when Terminator 2 went into production with a production budget, the first movie with $100 million production budget. And I remember people thinking, oh my God. And it was even crazier because James Cameron, the Terminator, how is that a film that deserves $100 million sequel?
Yeah.
Especially at the time. But back then, everyone had seen the Terminator on video, pay cable. So it'd become a favorite of everybody growing up. And that movie was a big hit, and when it came out, it would justify the budget. It gave us visual effects that Cameron built off of his work in The Abyss to give us. And it was quite the experience. And it really worked out. But that's because James Cameron is not a fraudulent creator. He is somebody that he'll spend your money, but he's doing the R&D for the entire industry. And he just will not compromise. And he'll just keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. I mean, to a certain extent, someone like Peter Jackson did that on the Lord of the Rings movies. He pushed until the very last minute to get everything done the way he wanted it. And that was only because he wanted it to be the best it could be. But nowadays, what is the incentive? The incentive now is everyone's going to get paid because this could be the last thing I ever work on. So I don't know. I mean, I believe that if given the opportunity, if you expect people to do their best work and you convey that to them, especially if you're the one writing the checks, you can get people to give their best work to you, but you have to put them on notice.
And I think putting them on notice and saying that there will be consequences for failure to deliver.
Yeah. And everyone gets these huge upfront paydays. And I think once you get those upfront paydays, then the pressure's off and you feel you don't have to deliver. Mm-hmm. And I think that, look, I'm a big believer in meritocracy and making things performance-based. And I think that studios talk about a treatment or a first draft or whatever. And I believe in step deals every step of the way. We'll see if we re-up it and we move forward. I like that. I like that incentivization of that. But it's interesting because, people should start looking at building long-term careers rather than getting as much as they can from every project. But that's not going to happen until more people have longevity in the business. It used to be people could have longevity in the business because they weren't spending $100 million a film. And that's another thing. I mean, if you look at, to me, while I'm not the biggest fan of his in terms of his work's pretty hit and miss, I have to respect the hell out of what M. Night Shyamalan did with his career. Mm-hmm. He was the golden boy, and then he flamed out making movies like The Lady in the Water and stuff like that. But what did he do? He came back, figured out ways to finance his own projects, and he made The Visit for $5 million for Blumhouse. He tucked his tail between his legs, and he went and made that movie. Then he made Split. Then he came back and he made Glass, and Blumhouse was releasing these things through Universal, and they all did pretty well because he sucked it up and was like, I'm not going to get the money I got for making Unbreakable because Sixth Sense was so huge. He went sort of back to his roots, put his money where his mouth was, and made those movies. You might not love all of his movies, but The Visit did very well. So did Split, and Glass to a certain extent. And they were all movies that were made on a budget. And they all got theatrical releases through Blumhouse. And now you see what's really interesting is if you really want to look at where I think some of the great creativity is going is in the horror genre, which is unique because it's always kind of been there. But if you look at a movie like Barbarian, a guy who came out of sketch comedy, wrote that script. They made it for $4,500,000 and it grossed $40 million. Big hit. And now he gets a fat deal with Warner Brothers, like a $38 million deal with him getting paid $10 million to write and direct, and then all these other producers. But, and to me, I'm like, even that's a lot of money for your second movie. I mean, I would have gone from a 4 point, but I understand everyone's got to get what they want. And
I would think there's a reasonable metric to go, because one of the things that we've seen proven time and time again is that a limited budget fosters more creativity. You have to focus on the things you can afford as opposed to things that you can't. And Marvel had that from the very start. I mean, Iron Man, they had a tiny budget compared to what they've been doing now.
Yes.
And they were like, well, we have to pick our Iron Man moments. So if we have to pick our Iron Man moments, that means we have to make all the other moments around that without Iron Man that we know people are going to love just as great. So how do we do that? And that's because that movie was being rewritten every day, mostly dialogue, not so much plot points, because they had all their stuff basically constructed, but they had to change the dialogue because Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau were looking at it saying, there's not enough of an impact here. You're outside the suit. You're talking to Pepper. You're talking to Obadiah Stane. We got to give that something. We got to give that oomph there so people actually pay attention and want to watch this. But now when you have the $150 to $250 million budget range, and you can rely heavily on the special effects and the wow factor, it comes at the expense of the very thing that people go to movies to see, which is character and journey.
Yes.
And it's like you can say a lot of criticisms about Michael Bay, but at least he tries to make things fun in between the crazy explosions and set pieces.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Michael Bay is he's absolutely he makes Michael Bay movies. You know what Michael Bay movies are, and sometimes, like, look, I find his movies to be very entertaining. They can be very entertaining, like whether you watch The Rock, Armageddon, which is just ridiculous, but it's definitely a guilty pleasure. Or sometimes he'll make a movie like Pain and Gain based on a true story that I really liked. But when you get Michael Bay, you know what you're getting. You're getting, and he is. There's nobody else that makes movies like Michael Bay. And he came out of the propaganda school that David Fincher came out of. Those music video guys came out of, not a school, it was a company, it was an ad agency, production company. And he has his own style. Like he says, he shoots for the edit, he shoots with 8 cameras, and we'll fix it later. And he does. If the story and the characters aren't great, he'll give you the spectacle and he'll cut it so fast you won't even notice.
Yeah.
So he's interesting, but he built up his career over time. But I would like to see more, and maybe we're not going to ever get. I mean, we might be witnessing the death of an art form, in the sense that I think cinema was the art form of the 20th century. I think game design and virtual reality, virtual entertainment is going to be the entertainment of the 21st century. But cinema is going to stick around for a while. And I think that knowing how to make great movies serves you in every other, knowing how to tell a story serves you in any other medium. So you can't go wrong. I just wish that we had a system. It's funny, now we have a system where the focus is on quality, and unfortunately it's not bringing us, like, I've never known, since I've worked in the business, anybody who made a good movie could find their way into Hollywood. I never saw anybody. This perception now, it's sort of a recent thing that, people are being shut out. And I'm like, Spike Lee wasn't shut out when he made She's Gotta Have It, and then when he made School Days and Do the Right Thing. Sure, he was a firebrand, but he took his destiny into his own hands. And I remember seeing She's Gotta Have It and thinking to myself, wow, this is a new voice. I'm watching a movie about a young Black woman in Brooklyn who has multiple boyfriends, and there was a point of view there, and there was a verve to the filmmaking. And I thought to myself, I've never seen this before. I like this, and it was because Spike Lee was a real original. And he focused on Black life because that's what he knew, which is what all filmmakers should do. But then Spike Lee honed his craft and can make a great movie like Inside Man.
Yeah.
What a heist thriller with a great sprawling cast of actors, and and then Spike Lee will do something like The 25th Hour. And here's a guy, again, Spike Lee's had his hits and his misses, but he makes things like Mo Better Blues and Girl 6. I mean, if you look at his filmography, he learned how to make movies independent level and worked his way up. He's been hired by studios to do things. He's made a lot of his own movies, and he has a longevity that a lot of filmmakers today don't, because he came out of his own independent experience. And we need more of that. And we need the studios. Like, I don't understand why all the studios don't have a Blumhouse. Why aren't they making movies for $5 million with the thought that they could release these theatrically? Look at Smile. What, a $17 million spend, and they make $12 million and they make $200 million, or a Megan, they spend 17 million and make however much money that movie made. It's incredible because that's where you see some new, unique filmmakers coming from.
And that's the foster of how the industry kind of stays vital, is that the alternative, which would be the independent sphere, always eventually becomes the mainstream.
Yep.
But what we have seen is that the only way that works is if the mainstream is open to receiving the alternative. And what has changed, at least that I've noticed in the last decade, is that the mainstream has been kind of resistant to the alternative because they decided to take kind of an alternative that's adjacent to what they would normally be taking and focusing on that. And this is where we actually do have a part of the industry where you have talented people that do make stuff that do get a little traction in their area that would normally be their the valuable marker that the studio system would seek after and use. And they're being told, no, we can't bring you in because you fit this mutable difference category, and we want to go over here to these people for whatever reasons they may have. And even though they have maybe just be on the cusp or not quite have made themselves as valuable as the other side, but they're there, but they're being snatched before they're able to make that achievement. And I think that's doing it a service to those people, because there's so much to learn from that achievement on their own, the way that Spike Lee did, and the way that David Fincher did, and Michael Bay did, and Steven Spielberg especially when he was a young kid. If you take that away from them, you've then now corrupted their ability to be the type of impactful filmmaker that they started out trying to be as a result. And I've never seen this behavior before in any other business, and even in my history of studying Hollywood and how it works, I've never seen anything like that before. You see the normal nepotism, which is fine because that's part and parcel with the industry, but you've never seen an actual like delay or rejection, because the one motivating factor that I always thought was true in Hollywood is that, oh, they're valuable, they'll make me money, I want them
right
with me so that I can make money off of them. And now we're getting something where that arithmetic doesn't exist anymore, or at least doesn't exist as on the frequency that it used to. And it's a shame, because I've seen a lot of great up and coming filmmakers who did some short films in festivals that played really well, and then they get these larger deals. And if they're and just like with the normal statistics of everyone else, there's 99% chance that movie's not going to get made.
Right.
And you just see how much it crushes their spirit, because they've started small, they got this big opportunity, and then it failed, and now they don't want to go back to that small medium anymore, because they felt like they deserved that thing because they've been told that, because they didn't go through the normal steps that most of us do trying to get to that point.
No, and it's true, and I think that what I find so strange is, like, especially this happens to filmmakers, foreign filmmakers, a lot. They'll, luckily we've got like the three musketeers of Mexican filmmakers, Inarritu, Cuarón, and Guillermo del Toro, who, again, they all started making independent movies. They made their way in, and they've maintained pretty much a lot of their own integrity. And they haven't. I mean, Cuarón made a Harry Potter movie, but he's also pretty much made all the things he wanted to make. But you see a lot of foreign filmmakers, they'll, like the filmmaker that made the Elite Force movies from Brazil, and these cop thriller, I really love them. They were great. And then he gets tapped to direct the American remake of RoboCop. And it's like, why? Why? And of course, he wants to come to Hollywood and work, and he'll take that job, but he can never win. You put these filmmakers in positions where they never win. When John Woo came to America and he ended up making Hard Target, he did his cut of the movie, and then the studio executives looked at it and they're like, why are there doves flying in these shots? What's with the slow motion with Jean-Claude Van Damme? His jacket flows out behind him. What is all this? And it's like, why'd you hire John Woo? He made Hard Target. It's really interesting because I saw that the bootleg of his director's cut was going around Hollywood like a year after the movie came out, and it was fine. It was a serviceable action movie, but when you saw the director's cut, he was saddled with an American screenplay, a action screenplay that he put his imprimatur on, and if they just let his movie be his movie, the whole thing that made like the guys who, there's the Indian movie RRR that everybody's talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I can only imagine what would happen if those directors came to America.
They wouldn't be allowed to do the musical numbers. I'm certain of that.
No, everything that they wanted to do and all their outlandish action, the studio would be like, what is this?
Yeah. It's a different avenue of fun that I don't think would resonate with their experience. And that's the other thing that I've kind of noticing is you've got a lot of people that are really young in positions that require experience.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of where it kind of nurtures the fraudulent creator, because they themselves don't really know.
No, and they're fraudulent as well. And it's, again, if you're an Ivy League educated, you have a master's degree in business from an Ivy League college, you can get hired at a studio.
Yes.
Like tomorrow. And usually there's nepotism involved. You have to know somebody at some level, and it's from the East Coast Ivy League, and you can get a job. I saw that 30 years ago when I worked at Warner Brothers, and that's fine. But the problem is, what do you know about the film business? It's amazing to me that I met people, even when I first started out at the studio, that they were working at Warner Brothers. That's the studio I worked at. They hadn't made movies. They would make movies later. They'd get their production job and they would learn how to be producers after being studio executives. I always thought it was so weird that the executives that worked at the studios didn't actually, at least the people, the gatekeepers that were deciding which movies got made, didn't actually make movies themselves. It always seemed odd to me that, well, and then there would be, and I worked for the senior vice president of physical production. So we were actually physically making the movies. We were overseeing and I was there when like Bonfire of the Vanities got made, and our department was trying to keep the costs down. And then the big executive offices would be like, nah, just give them what they want. And our department's like, no, nope. And we were always overridden. My boss was always overridden. And he just would throw his hands up like, why are they doing this? Why would you allow? I understood Fred Caruso was a great producer. Brian De Palma was the director, but you still, it doesn't matter who's working on it. The studio's like, yeah, just give them what they want. And the senior vice president of the studio, Bill Young, was like, no, we're not doing that. And when you don't even have synergy between your executive branches at the studio level, it things run away. I can see, it's interesting to me too. It used to be that when I was at Warner Brothers, all the executives after lunch would have to go watch dailies, and they had to go watch dailies. There was no internet portals, so they would all go to the screening room, the executive screening room, and usually from like 2 to 4, you would watch dailies on every movie that was in production at Warner Brothers at the time. They would show the previous day's shooting on film, or whatever, and everybody had to go. And so everybody knew where movies were. The studio was very aware which movies were great, which movies weren't, which movies were turning out, and which movies weren't. They knew, and that's why today, when you see a studio movie that turns out to be less than great, I'm like, wait, do people not watch dailies anymore? Do the people at the studios not watch them anymore? And or is it just too much? Because I can't imagine that it was a chore. Sitting through dailies is a chore and a bore. But everybody did it because they had to know if their movie was going to work or not. Because you had this executive that would green light it, then you had the people from our department that were overseeing its physical production, and then you had the heads of the studios. And it was an interesting way to do things. And movies that weren't very good still got made, but the studio knew where they were with those movies all the time. It wasn't like, we had a really bad test screening, we didn't know it was going to be bad. It was like, what? That's not the way it used to be.
Well, that brings me up to another thing, and I don't want to get too off topic because we're coming up to the end here. But I was wondering, when was the last time you heard of a television show or a feature film doing a table read before production?
Man, I don't know. And I've seen that in DVD documentaries. I mean, there is obviously, there's always what's called a page turn.
Yeah,
where the department heads sit down and you go through the whole script. But in terms of rehearsals or table reads, I mean, I would think that would be essential. Again, you have to pay actors to do those. You have to, so it costs money. But so for those of you who don't know, a table reads when the actors and everybody sits down and reads the script. In theater, it's essential. But with movies, I mean, there are a lot of times when the actors don't even see their fellow actors till they show up to shoot.
Yeah, and they only get handed size maybe an hour beforehand.
Yep.
But because I'm thinking about, because you've mentioned sometimes when you were directing a series many years ago, you did a lot of prep for it.
Yes.
And one of the things that I learned whenever I'd be a PA or help out on a show is that a table read, even though it costs money to have the actors in to do it, it's usually ended up saving us money on the production because they already knew what was the dynamic going on in the scene beforehand. The director already gave that information beforehand. They had time to practice it in between the table read and their actual shooting day. And you'd end up getting your coverage and your shots done on time and on budget, or if you're really lucky with the actors and their dedication, under budget. But I don't feel like we're seeing that anymore.
No, I don't either. And I would think if I'm lucky enough to direct another movie again, I would demand a table read, because there is nothing we did on Free Enterprise. There is nothing more helpful, first of all, than to hear a script performed out loud. Because you can make changes. Sometimes you get an actor that brings something to the script that you didn't know they were going to bring. And by doing a table read, you can hear things and be like, oh, let's make a few changes here to play to this actor's strengths. And a table read also helps the characters start to get a grasp on who they are and how they're going to interact with their fellow actors. Like anything else, the more prep and planning you can get on a project, the better off you're going to be. And that certainly includes the actors and their ability to understand their characters and bring you something. Because there's one thing that I've learned about all actors, especially, well, I say all actors that are not just cash and paychecks, that have gotten to the place in their life where it's like, give me another $1 million, let me go work on this movie. But most actors, they want to do their best job for you. They want to know what you want. They want the interaction. And that's what they're there for. And nobody, if you provide an environment where people know that they're required to step up and do their best, they usually can't. But there are, I think, in terms of fraudulent creators, they do everything they can to throw their weight around to make sure they're not found out, because they know they're fraudulent creators. That's the thing. They know it. They know they're figuring out a way to not do the work. They know that they're slacking off. They know it more than anybody else does, and they do it anyway.
think I think the stuff that you mentioned today in this discussion is very poignant, because if we can not so much expose them, because they'll never be able to admit it, but if the next generation could not fall into their habits, you don't even have to worry about exposing them, because you're just going to fly beyond them anyways. And it just sort of reinvigorates the competition, because when you have fraudulent creators, there is no competition, because nobody's actually competing for anything other than the job that they have.
Right. And you know what's so funny is that in this business, everybody wants everything to be great.
Yes.
Within this business, I don't think that there's another business that I can think of where the people that are in it, like one of my favorite places to be is being on an actual production that's shooting something, because you're seeing the best of the best. Like on a Hollywood movie, like when I was covering movies as a DVD documentarian, I was embedded with the production, whether it was X-Men 2 or Chronicles of Narnia or Superman Returns. I mean, working on these huge projects, I'm seeing the very best people, because that's who gets to work on these movies. And it's a joyful place to hang out, because everybody, no matter what department you're in, is turning out exemplary work, because you can't work on a $200 million movie unless you're the best, because every second counts. Literally every second has a dollar value associated with it. But yet getting to that point where you're actually on a set shooting is where so much of this stuff falls down. And the deals that are made by people that are in boardrooms that have never actually made a movie. You know, the gatekeepers of the industry also never made movies. You know, and then they themselves, unlike the days of yore, they're following research trends, and there's no one who has a gut instinct anymore that says, I'm going to make this movie. I'm going to get this movie made because I believe in it. I want to make it. You know, I interviewed Jerry Bruckheimer last week, and it you know, it was a pretty basic interview, but he said a few things like, look, I'm still doing what I always did. I'm trying to make movies that I want to make. You know, he never said he wanted to make movies that other people want to make. He said, I want to make, or we want to make, meaning his company. And it was interesting to hear him use that language, because he didn't say, well, you know, I try to make the movie the studios want me to make. He never said that. It was, and that's why, you know, I brought up in the interview, the first time I ever heard his name was a movie he made in 1981, which was Michael Mann's first theatrical feature, Thief. I coerced my grandfather into taking me. The profanity in it was extreme, and I'm like, uh-oh, because I was young. But I that's the first time I learned who Jerry Bruckheimer was. And you know, he made American Gigolo in 80, Thief in 81. Was it 48 Hours in 82? Was it 48? Yes. I don't know. And then he made Cat People in 82, and Flashdance in 83, and Beverly Hills Cop in 84, Top Gun in 86. I mean, and then the guy just had hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. And then, and now he's going to be 80 years old, and he has Top Gun Maverick and CSI and Amazing Race, you know, and he's doing I mean, because he wanted to make the movies he wanted to make, not that other people did. You know, he wasn't scrambling to get the jobs hoping he would hit something. He was like, nope, I'm making this my own.
And it says something when you have that want and that passion, you have a dedication that you wouldn't get for just trying to do something for a check.
Yeah.
It's like doing something for money is one thing, because again, this industry is very much a form of prostitution. But doing something where you actually enjoy it at the same time is the golden, you know, the golden calf you kind of want to get. And for a man like Bruckheimer to have that power for him is something that everybody should be going after and trying to to achieve, because that does do the one thing that keeps this business sustainable, which is the friendly competition. We all want to make something great. Rarely do you meet someone that wants to make something bad, a la Mel Brooks is the producer's scheme, where it's like we just want to take people's money and then deliver a dud and keep the profits. But you really want the competition because you want to be entertained, because when you're in this industry long enough, the movie magic kind of vanishes to a degree. And the only way you kind of get it is by seeing other people make movies that you aren't involved with. And you need them to succeed so that you can succeed. And if they inspire you and you inspire them, you build up the industry, you build up the quality of product, you entertain the audience, you bring in the money, and now you can go off to do more passion projects and the occasional acquiescence to a studio mandated movie or the typical assignment work. But you want that infrastructure there so that you can experiment, so that you can tell stories of different perspectives, different avenues, and things that maybe are familiar, but also at the same time, maybe we haven't seen before. And that's one of the things that I think has been kind of consistent is, and also been used as a double-edged sword to weaponize the derivativeness we've had, is they're like, oh, it's derivative, but it's still something new because we're experimenting with this new, the stagecraft volume system. So we'll do the derivative story, but we'll use that because that's new. And it's like, well, you're kind of really scraping the bottom of the barrel on that point there. And then you have the weird casting choices where, oh, we'll just remake this movie, but we'll do a completely different cast. We'll change it from men to women or women to men or what have you, because that's their desperation of trying something new, as opposed to saying, well, why don't we just take it from this different angle of a perspective? What if instead of we remaking Star Wars from, the Rebels' point of view, we remake it from the Empire's point of view? Like, and they're the good guys and they're fighting, trying to preserve their infrastructure and municipality from these terrorists that are attacking them randomly throughout the galaxy. That is something we don't get in pitched around. And if we do, it's usually ignored because it might be considered too much of a risk.
Right.
So this has been a fantastic conversation, Robert. I thank you so much for giving me the time to discuss this, to discuss fraudulent creators. And hopefully if anyone out there is listening to this and feels like they're worried that they'll fall into this trap, they can, listen to your words and avoid that, and maybe can resonate for a renaissance with regards to the industry, because I don't think this one conversation will do that, but it might be one step in the right direction for someone out there to not fall into that, because all you need is one to sign to set the standard, and the industry will follow them, especially if they makes a lot of money.
I agree. And I would like to see, I love movies as an art form, and streaming shows are great. And I really prefer, I love the novelistic approach, 10 episodes telling a whole story, but there is something still to be said for the paradigm of a motion picture, 90 minutes or 2 hours or something. Mm-hmm. And I want to see more of them, and I want to see more great ones. And I want to see more of the kind of movies that I grew up watching that I just don't see anymore. And they're not being made. And it bums me out.
It does, but I'm seeing some parallels between the late 60s and early 70s and today.
Yes, which would be wonderful.
It would be wonderful because it feels like with a little bit of effort and some changing direction that we've seen at a couple of studios, particularly Paramount and Warner Brothers over the last 2 years.
Yes.
It seems like we're going to maybe get that renaissance again. And I'm crossing my fingers that it stays true to that. So, as
my dog is just found her way in here.
Oh, well, that's actually good timing, because as we're wrapping up, is there anything you'd like to say, parting words to the audience, and with regards to your wonderful show, Robservations, which is frequently done almost every day, it seems like.
Oh, well, I one thing I love, if I'm not working on movies or television, I love talking about them, about the industry, about the art form that I love so much. And I try and do that on my show, Robservations, which is on my YouTube channel, The Burnett Work. We're going to be rebranding the name of the network because I've had so many other people come on the show. We're doing a show in Spanish called Que Pasa PGS. Our audience is called the Post-Geek Singularity, because I stole that from the idea of the singularity from Ray Kurzweil, whereas the singularity in his books are coming when AI achieves sentience. everything will change. But in my realm, I was a geek, and I dreamed of a time when we would have, I don't know, would they adapt The Foundation for TV, or would somebody make a great Dune movie? And now we live in that world. So that's why it's the post-geek singularity, because all those geek things that were so once niche have now gone mainstream, and we're getting, who would have thought we would get a 2-part adaptation of Dune, with the studio Warner Brothers behind it and a world-class filmmaker making it. And we live in such an embarrassment of riches when it comes to science fiction, fantasy, horror genre material, adapting books. The technology makes things amazing. So, I like to celebrate. Unless we're talking about modern Star Trek, for the most part, I'm pretty positive about all of this stuff. I mean, I go into everything wanting to love it, and because it's so hard to make things. And when filmmakers give me, like, I believe in James Mangold, for instance, I give Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny the benefit of the doubt until I've seen it. Hopefully it's going to be great. If it's not, I'll say it's not. But I will always go into it wanting it to be great, because James Mangold has made a lot. I even loved his movie Identity for what it was, and he made Copland with Stallone. And when you have filmmakers like him, who, even when he's made things that are less successful, he is not a fraudulent creator. He's doing the best he can. He's trying to make the best movie experience he can give you. So when he gets a hold of a franchise, he already did it with Logan, the X-Men franchise. He arguably made the best X-Men movie. Sorry, Brian, but he did. Or you look at, he does a remake like 3:10 to Yuma, or he'll make a biopic like Ford v Ferrari. And, I want to stand behind a creator. Walk the Line, another biopic that he made about Johnny Cash, he's a very fine director. So I want to get behind these creators that have longevity and support them in their endeavors. So that's kind of what my channel's all about too.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me and talk about the fraudulent creators and the things that plague the industry in that regard. It's greatly appreciated. For those of you listening, thanks so much for taking the time to listen. One of the things that I'd like to say for all of you guys out there, when it comes to story, it truly does all start with the script.